Okay, good morning. I think we ought to, yeah,
Senator Sullivan is running about 5 minutes late.
okay, we'll give her another 5 minutes. Okay, good morning, everybody. This is the next meeting of our commission study to look at the costing of special education. And just a couple notes of interest for folks here. Yesterday was in here, there is a printer available if you ever want to print from this Granite State location. They had given us the wrong address, and we kept, Representative Popovich and I keep putting this stuff in, and nothing was popping out. It was popping out somewhere else.
Oh, boy.
I don't know where. And I'm worried about that. But the address is, it goes Granite, GRANITE, 152 at HPE print, PRINT.com. I'll do it one more time. Granite 152 at HPEprint.com. It will print out in right across the hallway from us here.
You don't say.
So down, so yeah. So every now and then you need to get a copy of something. That's how you do it. What we have in front of us that we want to look at here today before we get into the presentation and the information provided to us by the Director of Special Education, DOE, we have one sheet which is of information to you. This sheet was put out on April 27, 2020. I don't know, I get my glasses on here. 23, how special education funding actually works. And it's worth reading. It really describes the federal involvement, or I should say non-involvement, where they have allocated, supposedly, they're supposed to be allocating around $26 billion per year. They're allocating half that, if that. And that's one of the causations of where we are today, is that we are having to pay the difference. We also have the minutes from several of our meetings prior to this. We have the October 15 minutes, and we have the September 30, 2025 minutes. Then there's another sheet which you also have, which is a colorful one here, looks sort of like a spreadsheet. You know, Rebecca provided that to us, which she'll be going over. So we have these 3 sheets here. And there's, where did these other sheets come from?
Those are from Becky.
Those are also you, Director? Okay, so we'll be looking at those several sheets with the other shortly here. So what I'd like to do, also there is a draft report that you may have. I'm trying to look at where mine is.
Do you not have a
This
copy
one?
there?
Yeah, no, I don't. I didn't get a copy of that.
Chairman.
Here's another one.
Okay, thank you. This is a draft copy that, as you know, according to the statutory language which formed this commission, we have to have our first report in by November 1 of next month. So that just really is going to be a quick synopsis of what we have done in the last several meetings. We haven't really had any findings or recommendations, but this is just a brief overview, and it's draft in format. It will go on to the required people, but also there's, as mentioned on October 29th, which is today, we haven't had today's discussion yet, so that's got to be all modified a little bit. As to, we also are going to be attaching the minutes to this report. Now, we can go through and look at those minutes right now if we care to approve the minutes. I've been cautioned by a clerk, please disregard crossing the Ts and dotting the Is and any spelling errors that may be therein.
Happy to correct them if that's not.
Well, we're happy to correct them, but as I've said before, what we really want to capture in here is the intent of what we're doing and get it summarized. We don't want every word regurgitated that we said in the minutes. So let's look at the September 30 minutes. And if you weren't here, you can abstain, of course. You weren't here, but we should look at that. It was an organizational meeting. And there was just a lot of forms that were just handed out. A lot of information was imparted. We didn't make any decisions at that meeting. Jen Dolph was there. Megan Murray was there. I was there. Representative Ames was there. Margaret Dry was there. Lisa Freeman.
Gendola.
Pardon me?
Yeah, and Gendola.
Yeah. So those are they. We don't necessarily have to go through and approve them, but I want to make sure that we have them attached, showing we did meet and we did have discussion. Is there anything on those minutes on the September 30 that you may want to address?
On the second page,
Yep.
the comment I had made about staff or, that are federally funded at the department, it is not 234 people. It's 23 people.
Sorry. Thank you.
I was like, that would be fantastic, but that is not.
I will.
Where's that on the page?
We're on,
It's 1, 2, 3, 5 lines down on the second page.
Thank you.
right here, yeah. Yeah, that sounds like the whole department. That is, isn't it?
Quite an exponential.
It's a big,
change.
Representative Ladd,
Yes,
the handouts that were handed out that meeting, are there copies of those?
yes.
That
We have
we can get,
copies
okay.
that are in the record. We do keep a file on that. We can, if you care to have those, we can, and you should, because they're information by nature. Yeah, okay. Jen is at another meeting this morning, Ways and Means, so she'll be popping in and out, but I'll make sure you get a copy sent to you. Any other comments, take a moment to look at it. So you said, Director, you had 30 or 28, 23?
Not 2, 3, 4. I must have just had an errant 4 in there. Sorry.
And as I found out yesterday, your office is no longer on the first floor, you're on the third floor, back in the corner. Okay, over at Granite State College.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
so as far as making that correction, would you like me to correct that now in the minutes, or can I do that in the previous version of the minutes, or what would you like me to do?
what we can do, we can make a handwritten change here for our reference, but I would make the, the corrections so that after we look at this and say, okay, we're good with it, and Jen can get that captured in the record.
Thank you.
Any further thoughts on that? I'd like to have a motion to approve the September 30th, 2025 minutes.
Second.
Okay, made by Representative Ames and second by Representative Dry. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Are there any abstentions for folks who weren't here?
Any, yes, we have a whole slug of them.
Slug. What is
Yeah.
a slug?
Well, Senator Sullivan, Senator Murphy,
Interesting choice of words, Mr. Chair.
Rebecca Wilson, and Daryl.
Dwayne.
Dwayne, excuse me, and Dwayne, yeah. Okay, from both. All righty. Let's go to the other ones, October 15.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I'd just like to help Representative Murray that Dan Corder is with Boothby Therapy Services. You're welcome.
I think I did later on, but
yeah, I thought I saw that in,
further down. I just forgot to go back and add it in,
okay.
but I will.
Anything else to clarify in that? Yes, Senator Sullivan. I'm used to you when you were on the education
Old
committee.
habits, I'm telling you. I miss serving with you. I did. Yeah, so can I just ask for a, I don't even know what page, the pages aren't numbered, but second to the last page, my comments about the IEP advocates. It almost sounds like I'm supporting the concept of it. Could I request a change in wording to say maybe Senator Sullivan expressed concerns about IEP advocates, and then at the end, the committee to look at,
I'm sorry, what page are you on? Sorry.
like, second to the last.
1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th page.
So it says Senator Sullivan talks about IEP advocates and charging a fee to families to advocate for services, and would like the committee to look at that concept.
Okay.
It almost sounds like I'm encouraging that. Could we change it to Senator Sullivan expressed concerns about IEP advocates and charging a fee to families to advocate for services, and would like the committee to look at that impact?
Yes, so Senator Sullivan expresses concerns about IEP advocates and charging the fee to families for services, and would like the committee to look at that impact.
That
Yes,
impact.
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Everybody understand that? Okay, any other,
I will make that change.
okay, do we have a motion? Okay, we have a
Second.
motion made by Representative Freeman
Second?
and a second from Senator Sullivan. Further discussion? Pardon me?
As amended.
As amended, yes. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Good. Thank you.
And Becky Wilson.
And one abstention. Okay. We have the draft. We'll look at that at the end today. Let's get right into our business today. But I also want to really start narrowing down where we're going, seeing we have roughly a year. And I'd like to really get into the discussion of how we cost out special education and looking at all the implications and the linkage to that. We're looking at some of what we think are what are the causations of what contributes to an IEP, the process and that, which is very much we need to do. We've been looking at the Medicaid, which that we have to continue looking at that with Henry Lipman's input. But I'd like to really get into some of the specific costing. We should have a lot of our LSRs out and available here shortly, and some of them are looking at this. And so it might give us a point where we can start considering how we're going to go in terms of costing out special education. The special education cost, and we open it up also to the $68 million for differentiated aid that's in there. And we also talking about the IDEA funding, which is approximately $50 million. So with this special education aid, remember it was used to be $34 million. We were about $16 million short. So we're talking $50 million there. So roughly the state and IDEA are kicking in approximately $150 million out of the $977 million we're spending, that difference being local dollar. We need to get into this discussion. So, but what I'd like to do right now is slip into where we had requested for more information on how the charter schools and the EFAs are impacting the cost of special education and to the local districts. And Rebecca Fredette does have this material available for us to look at as we go through and discuss. So I'll hand it off over to you, Director. Maybe you can tell us which one you want to start with, and we'll follow along. And I'd like to be able to ask questions as we go.
Absolutely. Yep. So I'm going to start with the one that says information requested from the commission to study the cost of special education. It's just the white sheet with the chart in the middle. I was asked how many students with disabilities are currently attending charter schools. We currently have 804 students from charter schools attending charter schools, and the district that they reside in is responsible for all services at that charter school. The number of districts with students with disabilities in charter schools is 88. So of our 176 districts, 88 of them have students in a charter school, anywhere from 1 to, I think the highest was 20. So it is a wide range. Some districts have quite a few, some districts just have one student, but those were the numbers that you had asked me for. And all of those costs fall back to the district. So they are in with all of the district costs that the district reports that they pay out.
Yeah, we'll have a question right after
go ahead.
the blocks here. Representative Ames.
How is students with disabilities defined?
So you would have to meet the criteria outlined in IDEA for one of the 13, in New Hampshire, 14 disability categories that there are. I can provide that list for you if you'd like.
What's the process for identifying that?
Sure. So each district would need to go through an evaluation process where they get permission from the parent, and there are specific evaluations for each disability that they must complete. If you look at specific learning disability, which is a large category, you have to have an academic evaluation, you have to have an intellectual evaluation, you must do an observation, and then you must also rule out hearing or vision difficulties. So you have to have a screening for hearing and vision, and all of those would need to be reviewed before you could determine whether the student was eligible. And then each district goes through an eligibility document to determine if they meet the criteria of each separate disability. So that one is just specific learning disability. It's different for each category of disability.
So when a child is receiving services over at the charter school, their services are premised upon an IEP meeting that made that decision,
Yes.
which is a little bit different from the EFA.
Yes.
Okay, yes,
May I?
yes.
Thank you for taking my question. Of the 804 students with disabilities that are attending these charter schools, do you have a number of how many are actually receiving services?
I believe all of them are receiving
All of
some
them.
type of service, yes.
Okay, and may I follow up?
Yes.
And I know this may seem like a silly question, but how many districts are in the state?
100, so we keep adding. I believe we're at
why I'm
176.
asking.
I believe we're at 176 right now. I think.
176.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
And of those 804 students, are there any that are being monitored? So they're getting close to the end of their IEP. and the speech therapist says, well, I'm just going to watch to see if the skills which we've taught are being applied.
So they might, monitored is a very different term in special education. That's why I needed clarification. That's what we do we monitor districts. So that's why I was kind of like, So a speech language pathologist might go to a consult and consult with the staff that are working with the student to see if they need to continue to provide those services. But there isn't really a monitor category that you would put on an IEP.
Okay.
Any other questions about charters?
I just wanted to make sure, sorry if I may, Mr. Chair, that when we're talking about districts, should we be just using the word district of liability? Or, sorry,
We say district of residence.
residents.
Yeah.
Is it okay? Thank you. Thank you.
Have you broken out these 804 students and demonstrated the cost associated with those 804 students?
So that goes back to, it's in the whole cost of special education for whichever district those students come from. So if their district of residence puts all those costs into their regular special education costs, it's not something that they separately put out and say, this is what we pay for separately for charter schools. It's all within the cost of special education.
So if I could, in the detail of our budget, for example, in special ed, if we're providing services to a charter school for something like speech, usually we're doing it with our own staff. So we're not going to break out that into like a separate line. It's just the speech person's time. So that just becomes part of our cost of the whole speech section of our budget, as an example.
And you pay for travel too?
Not for our own staff, no. That would just be part of the obligation of what they do. Now, other districts are different. If we were using a contracted service provider, we definitely would pay for travel. We try to do charter school expenses and charter school services like that with our own staff whenever we can.
So I'm trying to filter through this a little bit, seeing that up my neck of the woods, some of the distances driven is significant distance. And is that a cost which is being absorbed by the district to provide these special ed costs, or is it something that the charter is? Becky?
Good morning. For most districts, as Dwayne is discussing, if you're using your own staff, then they're contracted through the district. So what they do with their time is already part of what their everyday expenses are. If you're using a contracted services, a lot of times transportation is already rolled into the contract that you've signed with the outside agency, or perhaps it's a separate billing item in the contract that you've signed with them. It really does depend on how you're providing the services. And I think to go back to what Becky Fredette was saying earlier, you're making these IEP decisions for the individual child about what the services are going to look like for that child. It's not necessarily a blanket decision for all of the students that you have at X charter school. It may be different for different students. And to Dwayne's point, some districts do break out if they have a significant amount of money in their special education budget for charter school services. Some districts do break that out in their line item budget. It just depends on how you're providing those services, or what percentage of your special ed budget perhaps that you're using that for.
Representative Dry?
Thank you. So if a charter school is outside a school district, would the sending district maybe contract with the district that it's in?
They can, yep. So they can. There are three ways they can provide services. They can send their own staff. They can contract staff and send them to the charter school, or they can contract with the charter school and have certified staff provide services there.
Okay, thank you.
But
So
to just follow up quickly,
Yeah.
Representative Dry, it's uncommon, I think, that a district would contract with another public district to provide those services, if that was what you were getting at. I think if the charter school is in Cornish, would somebody contract with the Cornish School District to provide those special ed services?
Not typically.
Not typically, because there's just not enough staff time for them to take on students from other districts.
So the possibility exists.
They could. I mean, I'm not saying they can't, but it's. I would
never
think
heard
that
of
districts are having such a hard time getting their own staff. I can't see them working to give their staff for somebody else's district. I think it would be difficult.
So I need a little bit more clarification on this. I'm trying to find out, is there a travel account is that coming out of your travel account for your school? For example, administrators have it to go on maybe a conference or two, and then teachers, the same thing. They may come down for the Social Studies Association or whatever, and they get reimbursed by that for the travel per mile.
That's going to vary district by district.
So there's not an account within the special education area where for travel for going to that school and back, which could be 15 miles each way.
And that's going to vary district by district how they do that, but that's not a cost that you can ask for reimbursement. Like if they were applying for special education aid, they can't ask for that as a reimbursement because it's not in the child's IEP. That's an additional cost that the district has incurred unless they contracted and then the contractor built it into their cost for that service.
Because it still leaves a hole in my mind as to how we paying for that special education teacher or speech therapist housed at Bath Village School that's going to go out to a charter school, and how are they going to be reimbursed for traveling in their personal car to and from X number of times per week or whenever they have an IEP meeting, because they have to oversee what's going on out there. Or
Most
deliver the
districts are
service.
not doing that.
They're not.
It's part of the staff's time. You're telling the staff in that situation what their schedule is, and that is part of what they're doing.
So we're telling the staff, you use a personal car to go and pay for the fuel, et cetera. Yes.
I mean, again, to Becky's point, every district can make sort of their own decision. And to Dwayne's point, I won't tell you that there's no districts that do that. There could very well be, but most common, no, you're not doing that. You may have some reimbursement for mileage in your budget as a whole, for staff as a whole, but not necessarily broken out specifically by the speech pathologist gets this much mileage reimbursement, the school psychologist gets this much reimbursement. You probably don't have it broken down to that level. There may be some line item somewhere that says mileage reimbursement for staff, but whether it's specific to special ed or not, I don't know many districts that break it down at that level.
Is that correct? Like, we don't know if it's really happening or not, because if a district has mileage reimbursement, they don't differentiate between whether it was providing special ed services or a substitute teacher. So along those lines, we really don't know.
I think that would be something you would have to specifically ask kind of district by district to get an actual answer as to how they account for those things. And again, some districts may not even offer that sort of as a benefit, maybe is the wrong word, but as part of a contract, they might not offer that to their in-district staff. Some may. I think it probably depends, quite honestly, on how much the district can absorb financially as to what they can offer for things like mileage reimbursement within the district versus mileage reimbursement outside of the district. A lot of districts do consider it that way. If you're driving from school to school in your own district, you're not able to put in for mileage reimbursement. Whereas if you're asked to go to an out-of-district meeting, perhaps you can submit for mileage. But I think that really is district to district dependent. You'd have to ask specifically.
Thank you.
Why I'm Representative Senator Sullivan.
Representative Murray was
Oh, no,
okay.
that's okay.
I didn't
Yeah.
see your hands on.
Thank you. So that's no different than like in Manchester, we've got teachers, like the music teacher will go from school to school to school to school, right, within the district. So it's the same concept. So you're saying it's probably all in that sort of cluster of money that's allocated.
Yeah, and if I mean, that's very common. Like even in a district like in Bow, we have 3 schools. We'll have service providers very regularly that'll go between buildings. You know, we have a speech pathologist who'll do some work in preschool, do some stuff at the elementary school, might need to cover a meeting at the memorial school. That's just part of that kind of position. We also have, you know, like you said, a music teacher who teaches one class at the high school, but is also at the middle school. That's just part of your schedule.
Representative Murray, do you have?
Yeah, I did just have another question. So given if it is a charter school throughout the state and it could be potentially multiple miles away, in exigent circumstances, like we noted, it's a general line item in the ledger, I'm assuming, when we're looking at district budgets. So would that be something then they would approach their administrators and say, hey, or I would like to ask for reimbursement, or if that need arose?
I think thank you, Representative Murray. I think it probably depends, quite honestly. I think this is one of those questions that you would really need to ask specifically for that answer as to, some districts may offer services to students in charter schools, and it may be different depending on which charter school. So some students, maybe at charter school A, the district is sending a staff out there, and perhaps part of that agreement with that staff member is they're going to get mileage reimbursement for that. Charter school B, those students, maybe they are bused back to the district. So then in that situation, there's not necessarily transportation mileage reimbursement, but there's transportation costs. You may have another situation where you are outsourcing services for charter school C because of the distance or because of the staffing need, and you just can't fill it with your in-house staff, those kinds of things. So I would love to say it's a blanket. I think it's probably a blanket agreement for each district, but what it means for each individual situation, I think you'd have to really ask specifically. I will tell you, I think that most of your special education directors or student services directors could tell you what they do if that was a question that people asked specifically.
Years ago, Dr. Mark Joyce was real concerned with this issue of reimbursement for travel. And I was in that district he was concerned with, SAU 23. We could not find a speech pathologist. So we got somebody out of Concord and driving 70 miles up. For a while, the state was paying for that. Then the state said, no, we're not doing that. It's on you, district. So then what the district does, they turn around and go, what a contract service. And the contractor puts the travel costs into that contract. So we are paying for the travel. So we're paying travel there, but we're not paying travel for some of our folks which are going that 15 miles to the other school. It seems to me there's a little need to look at this further. As if we're trying to find out what the actual costs are for delivering services of special education.
I would agree with that, Representative. And I also think it's, worth considering the fact that part of the reason it's so complicated is that unlike most states, in New Hampshire, the district of residence is responsible regardless of where the charter school lies.
Yeah.
Whereas in many states, the district either where the charter school is responsible, or there's some other arrangement so that it's the likelihood of having to coordinate so much of that is more limited. Whereas in New Hampshire, it's all over the place.
Right, or the charter school is their own LEA and they do it all themselves.
They're responsible. So I do think that part of the complicated nature of this conversation is that we are one, if not the only, I believe, state to manage it in this manner.
And we do manage it for a career technical education center. So we have tuition and transportation account for that. It's not enough. Granted, we're reimbursing a very small figure in terms of miles per pupil at the cost. But that cost right there is reimbursed through a different account than if for the sending schools. For CTE, we appropriate $9 million each year. And we're concerned not raising it because of maintenance of effort. And I'm concerned that if we can reimburse for travel there, why aren't we not reimbursing the staff to use their own cars for this particular aspect of special education? Yeah. I'd like to dig down in this a little bit more and find out how many districts are doing it or are not doing it. Can you continue?
I can. So the next piece of information was asked for is the number of students with a disability or a disabling condition who are receiving an EFA. And we were able to get the number of 890, and that was confirmed through our Division of Educational Analytics and Resources and through the Children's Scholarship Foundation, that there are 890 students who receive an additional adequacy funding through EFA for a disability or a disabling condition. However, the Children's Scholarship Foundation does not separate those out into two separate categories of a student with a disability or a student with a disabling condition. So I'm not able to give you that number. I can give you a tentative number that the Division of Educational Analytics was able to provide us, that if you look at when the child was in a regular public school and not receiving EFA funds, there are about 240 that had been identified as students with disabilities, but that is a very tentative number and it's not definite. But that was the only data we were able to look at because it isn't tracked separately by the Scholarship Foundation. And that's a completely separate fund from all the other special education funds that we're discussing. Like it doesn't come out of special education aid. I don't provide any money for that. That is all through EFA funding.
If I can clarify.
Yes, Representative.
Thank
Wright.
you. And so the question then I think that I'm trying to get at here is with regard to the EFA funding, you said there is no data available for how much additional dollars for those 890 students are awarded.
I could find that out. That wasn't a question that was asked of me, but I could find that out. Yeah.
I would like to know that.
Further questions regarding this?
Yeah.
Yes, Representative Ames.
So for each of these two categories, disability or disabling condition, we don't have data out of the total tracked by the Children's Scholarship Fund. My question is, has that entity been asked to track this data in that way with two categories instead of one, or why not? Why don't we have this data?
I have very limited knowledge of EFAs in this portion. I will state that. I don't know why they do not track it that way. I think it's because if you have a student with a disability or disabling condition, they give you the same amount of funding. It's not a different amount of funding. I would have to ask why it isn't asked for, but that is completely, all that data is through the Children's Scholarship Foundation, and they do all of that.
Rebecca? Becky?
I know it's very confusing with us sitting right next to each other. We've gone through this for many years, I feel like. I will just say, I think that the only difference from my understanding is students with a disability, in theory, have gone through the eligibility process for special education, whether that was in a local district before they left to take the EFA, or whether the parent has pursued that with the school district somehow outside of what they're doing. A disabling condition is a lower bar in terms of the parent needing to provide some sort of documentation from a health professional that says the child has a disabling condition. So they don't need to go through the eligibility process per se to decide if they're eligible for special ed. They just need to provide documentation that their child has a disabling condition. So it's two different processes.
And if I may, and they may not, if they have a disabling condition that's been provided by typically a medical professional, if they went back to a public school, they may not qualify for special education as a student with a disability.
Representative Freeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to make sure that I have this crystal clear. What you're saying is that if a child or a family is receiving the EFA, it doesn't necessarily need to meet the criteria as set forth by a traditional public school when they are determining whether a child meets the qualifications of an IEP. Is that correct?
Not an IEP. A student with they tried to make the language very clear that it is either a student with a disability as identified through IDEA definitions, and then a student with a disabling condition as identified through a doctor. But there is no there's no separation of how much money is given, and they don't separate them out. Like, you can qualify for this funding either way,
Right.
And you receive the same amount of funding, but it's two separate categories.
Students with a disabling condition can be qualified just by a health professional. It doesn't have to be a medical doctor necessarily. And it also there's no IEP associated with it. It's simply documentation that you have a disabling condition.
Representative Dry?
Thank you. Thank you. Could you just give me an example of a disabling condition?
I don't see the documentation. So you want to field that one?
I mean, I think that a pretty common example would be maybe anxiety. So perhaps a student comes in to the EFA program with a documentation that the child has anxiety. That would qualify them, I believe, and again, I don't work for the Children's Scholarship Fund, but that would qualify them for the differentiated aid for special education because it's considered a disabling condition. However, if that same documentation was brought to the school district for eligibility, there's a process that the student and the family would need to go through to determine whether or not that anxiety was significant enough and had an educational impact that would lead them to be eligible for special education. And then an IEP would be written if they were eligible that would address how to help the student with that.
Thank you.
Representative Ames?
So I think what we're talking about is qualification for differentiated aid in the EFA's situation. And we don't know whether that money is actually being spent for what we might call special education costs or not. It's qualification for in a category that brings to the whoever's receiving the EFA an amount of money. Is that right?
Yes, and it's completely separate from all the other special education funding we're discussing.
Representative Freeman?
Actually, Megan had her hand up before I did.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. So I am curious though if we have any other data, and this question is for any of us, just regarding whether or not when we're talking about the EFA funds, since they're public taxpayer dollars, is there a way to ensure that those dollars are actually being spent on services for a disabling condition, or to ensure that they are having like an efficacy standard? Or
I'm not, as I stated before, I'm not familiar with the EFA process because I don't have anything to do with it. I could ask for somebody to speak to it, but again, it is completely separate funding from the funding we're discussing.
Representative Freeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think because we have so many questions swirling around this, would it not be helpful if we had someone from the Children's Scholarship Fund here to help us go through this information? There's a lot of holes, and I appreciate the input that Becky and Rebecca have given us. But I think in order to drill down on this, we really need somebody who would be the subject matter expert.
Makes sense to me.
If we're talking dollars, which we will be talking about, if you take what we pay out for differentiated aid and multiply that times 890 roughly, it's well over $2 million.
Could I just
Some
have
quick
one?
modern math, yes.
I would want to also find out from them, which I think is a great idea that they come. That would be great. I believe that where there's a reevaluation process in the IEP process in the public school district realm, like every so often this has to be redone. I believe once you qualify for the extra differential aid in the EFA program, you never have to qualify for it again. It's a one-time qualification, so you'll get that differential aid every year. And I think
Just see them coming.
also for the differential aid under, for lack of a better word, under the free and reduced lunch differential. I think once you get that once, you have it for the lifetime that you're in the program.
Right, so I think that's,
That would be the question.
to that point, I think it would be important to have the facts, because obviously on your end, you have questions about that as well. We have questions as well, and I'd rather get, muddle through this, but get right to the point and find out what the true answers are.
Is disabling condition terminology that's in IDEA?
No, it is not. It
Is
is
that,
only in that legislation.
it's just as we have in statute here for the EFAs?
Yes,
And within the IDEA, you're required to, every 3 years,
yes,
to have that review. In fact, oftentimes there's reviews done in between 1 and 3 years.
yes.
So just so I make sure that, so whoever's establishing that there's a disabling condition, is there some kind of a standard? For example, like if you're going to have a standard, I don't know, I'd like to know the categories some of these students are in, whether it's other health impaired, which is kind of a catch-all for some, or if it's specific to the condition and criteria established by ASHA. American Speech and Hearing Association.
Representative Ladd, I don't think that, and again, I think to Representative Freeman's request, having somebody here about how they approve these things would be really useful. But I don't believe they categorize disabling conditions through the EFA program because there's no need for that. I don't believe they group them in that way. I just believe it's yes or no, you have a disabling condition. I don't believe it has anything to do with the categories that we use for special ed.
Who delivers the service?
Whoever the parent chooses through the
So-
EFA program, if they even, I don't work.
So they
with
wouldn't,
children's
yeah, so they wouldn't use an IEP if they have EFA funding. It's just an extra funding because you've qualified for it. So there's no IEP, there's no extra services, there's no anything required.
Senator?
I, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As someone who has used the EFA programs, I can put some light on this. You every year have to reapply for your funds. Every single year you have to reapply. You have to prove residency and other things every year. But you also have to submit for every single purchase that you make, and it has to be qualified by the Children's Scholarship Fund before you get reimbursement for anything. So all of that is documented, what they use it for, tutors, everything else. And when it comes, this is from the DOE website, to qualify for special education differential aid under RSA 194F for the purposes of an EFA, the student shall meet the requirements of a child with a disabling condition as defined in 34, oh my gosh, my eyes are getting worse every year, CFR 300.8, evidence of a disabling condition for the purposes of differentiated aid provided by a determination of eligibility for special education by an IEP team in accordance with, and that goes on with the law, a determination by a medical professional licensed to practice in any state in the United States. So those are the two criteria.
Where's that reference? Where's that reference?
That is on the DOE website. Dr. Google brought me over there.
Dr. Google,
He's the all-knowing.
yeah, all know.
His PhD in all-knowingness.
But that was
But I can forward that to,
And you said 194F, right?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, maybe I could add to that. There's a New Hampshire Education Department fact sheet, Department of Education fact sheet, that's special education eligibility and New Hampshire education freedom accounts that goes through what was just said. January 2024 is the date of it.
And when was that noted? You said what, 2024?
Yeah, January. That's the date of the fact sheet.
Got it, thank you.
And there's, as with many statutory references, there are also regulatory, there are regulations.
So,
Are there, may I?
go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Ludd, and maybe this is for Becky. With regards to the DOE's fact sheet, are you familiar with this? Are
My
there,
office created it.
okay, yeah, I figured as much. Are there certain assurances that are different with regard to EFAs using disabling conditions versus what is guaranteed under federal law for a student with a disability? So are there differences in the threshold for service providers or certain individuals like that?
Through the EFA, those are all determined by the parent. So any services that would be done would be through the parent, and the parent would determine what they get for their child. If you have an IEP in a school, then the IEP team makes those determinations, but EFA is on the parent.
Thank you.
Further questions? I think we ought to have Kate Baker in here, Demers.
Agree.
And have her come in and explain this a little bit more to us in terms of how it's being managed through the EFA program. Any other issues regarding EFA we want to address right now before we move on down to episodes of treatment? Okay, Rebecca?
So the next part of the document shows the funds distributed through an episode of treatment and court-ordered placements. Episodes of treatment, as you can see, have only been going for 3 years. And the numbers for the fiscal year 2026 are just as of the end of September. So that's not, we're still processing that and going through that. For episodes of treatment, 100% of costs submitted, if they meet criteria, are covered. For court-ordered placements, districts need to cover 3 times the cap, which is the average cost per pupil, before they get 100% reimbursement for court-ordered placement costs. We only went to 2014. I know it was 20 years that was asked for, but only went to 2014. Prior to that was called something different. So it's a different category. We just didn't get it out to you before we came. But those are the costs that we have put out for court-ordered placements and episodes of treatment in the past 12 years.
Can you explain the episodes of treatment a little bit more to us?
Sure. Episodes of treatment are determined through the Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS, through their system of care. A child has been determined to need assistance based on a mental health, typically mental health needs, and they are placed in a facility to provide them with support around those mental health needs. And it is with DHHS and the parent that determination is made. And then the state had passed language that said, understanding that this is a medical condition, we would help to support paying the costs of that placement, because that's not something the IEP team determined, and it's not something that they would have chosen based on the student's disability necessarily, not necessarily.
So just to
Yes, go ahead.
clarify,
Representative
I
Murray.
just wanted to double check. So you're saying Department of Health and Human Services pays for that? Oh, I'm sorry. So that's what I
So
wanted to make sure.
the child is determined to need an episode of treatment through work with the parent and DHHS. The funding for special education and related services goes through the department, and then DHHS pays some of the other portions of the funding.
Okay.
It's kind of split between the two.
Are these costs usually medical costs, or are they also academic or?
It's anything that's in the IEP. It can only be the items that are in the IEP.
How long does an episode of treatment last usually?
We had initially been told that they would last anywhere around 6 weeks. We're seeing that some of them are lasting 2 years. So that it is all determined by DHHS. It is determined by the facility they place them in. We receive letters from DHHS that will say the placement is from here to here, and then they will update it and say, nope, we're now extending it to here. No, we now are extending it to here. So that's all through the placement and the needs of the child.
And talking about placement of the child during this period of time, is that in a hospital? Is it in a residential
It's a
placement?
variety of different placements. Sometimes it could be in a hospital, it could be in a residential placement. There's a variety of placements that they place them in.
May I?
Yes, Representative Murray.
In the event that obviously we know that there's sometimes wait times for placement in either residential or inpatient care facilities, what portion of this factors into that 6 week to 2 year wait time? Do you know if there are delays to accessing the care?
We only pay once the child is placed. So
Okay.
once the child is placed in a facility or placed in a home for whatever reason, then we start to pay for those services, because the district is trying to provide services wherever the child might be at that point, any way that they can.
Thank you.
Representative?
Thank you. Does this also include foster care?
No.
Thank you.
Senator Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Becky. So when they go into a treatment center, does Medicaid or Medicare kick in for that?
It might because it is through the parent. The parent and DHHS are working together to make this placement. So yes, they could be accessing Medicaid.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know if any of the parents are saying, no, I don't want you to access Medicaid, so it's all on us?
I wouldn't know that because it's a medical placement. We're just trying to support the child with their special education needs, but the placement is a medical placement, so we wouldn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Representative Ames.
How is that the answer to that question of whether this is special education services a part of it? And so you should be paying for it. How's that determination made that this indeed is, this piece of what that child's getting in their basically medical-based placement is yours?
So we would, typically you don't change the IEP when a child is placed for an episode of treatment. They may change the placement just so it reflects where the child is located, but they would document that that wasn't a decision determined by the IEP team. But they wouldn't change, they typically would not change any of the services. They would still receive their specially designed instruction, their OT, PT, speech. Those were all things determined by the IEP team. So they wouldn't change any of those because the child still needed those for their education. So really the placement is the only thing that is determined, and that's why the costs are split between us and DHHS. We pay for the special education, the related services that were already determined to be needed by the child. DHHS pays for that placement, or they may access Medicaid. I think it's different for every one of them, but that wouldn't be determined to be the responsibility of the district because it's the medical placement.
So when it's a medical placement and we have the person now in the hospital or wherever they're being placed to receive this treatment, now the IEP portion that we're responsible for is delivered by whom? Do we go out and hire a paraprofessional or do we contract a service?
Depends on the facility that the child is in. So if they're in a residential facility, typically it's one of our approved private providers, and they would receive services the same way all the other students in the facility receive services. They have special education teachers, they have speech, OT, PT in those places. If they're in a hospital setting, typically the district will look to try to do tutoring or sending a special education teacher out to support them while they are in that facility. So it depends on the facility, how those services are provided.
How is this different than placing a student in a situation which is paid through special education aid, a catastrophic situation where they can be either in a hospital or they can be in a residential placement or homebound? I'm just trying to get a handle on how do we oversee that the academic side is being provided, and how do we know how much of the time there is academic versus medical?
So that decision is made by the IEP team decision, and it's an educational decision. You've made the decision based on the child's needs in education. You're not making it based on their medical needs. You're making it based on their educational needs and them accessing their education. So you've determined that this child can only access their education if they're placed in a residential facility, or you've determined they can access their education while they're in the public school, or they can access their education in a day school. But it's made by the IEP team based on their educational needs as determined by the IEP team.
Boy, I have a hard time wrapping around this in terms of figuring out what these costs are really academic, instructional costs associated with the IEP versus those of medical. And I'm having the same issue with catastrophic aid as well.
It all ties back to the student's IEP. If the IEP team has determined that this is what the child needs to access their education, then we're not making it based on the doctor said the child needs to have OT twice a week. You're making it based on that the physical therapist has said we need to put this. It's all by the IEP team. It's not made by a medical team. It's two separate entities.
Yeah.
So oversight by the IEP team. I'm looking at, there was a news article maybe several years ago about a student that was placed down in Tennessee, and it was horrible. And HHS said, we're pulling. So what's going on here is who's doing the oversight? Is the Department of Education checking to make sure this episode of treatment and the IEP goals objectives are being met? Or is it the IEP team from the school somehow providing oversight
Yes.
at a location which is over there in Timbuktu?
So that those placements are made by DHHS, and then the district works with the placement to ensure that the services are provided through that placement. But
How do they guarantee services being provided?
They have to provide documentation. They've provided services. They have to give service logs. They have to provide some, have you shown progress on your IEP goals? But that district works with that placement. We do have in state law that it says they must be placed in an approved program. And most of the time DHHS does place children in a special education approved program, even out of state. They try to do that every time they place a child, if it is a child with a disability.
Do we ever look at the logs?
the district would look at the logs, and if we were to monitor them, we may, when we go to monitor, we do say, you have a child that's placed out of district, we want to look at that child's logs and see that those services were provided to that child. We look at, if they have a charter school student, we'll ask to see a charter school. Like, we take a little bit of each one, and we don't just look at the students that are in the building. We would look at any student and say, you have 3 out of district, you have 4 charter, you have 2 of these. Like, we want to see a sample from each of these and show that you have that documentation through our monitoring process. Yeah.
I struggle with that one too, seeing that I've gone through this, not with episode treatment, but with just a regular IEP where the speech therapist said, well, I saw this person, this, and this. And when you ask to look at the log showing the calendar, nothing's documented.
Yep. And they would receive a finding from us.
Okay. All right. Further question, Becky,
Whichever, we'll get it.
Just go for that and Wilson.
That's right. That sounds good. I just wanted to bring us back as well that what we're talking about is episodes of treatment. That is a different process than the court-ordered placements that are also on this sheet, which is a totally different type of process that school districts are navigating along with Department of Ed and DHHS and the court system. So to just make sure that we're clear, and when school districts are enjoined in a court case for a juvenile, the number one thing that the court asks is that the school district have a referral and eligibility determination meeting to see if the child qualifies for special education. And so that is something that the court basically orders the school district to do immediately, so that if the child has not yet been through that process for whatever reason, that the district is going through it to see if perhaps the child is eligible. And the sole reason really for that is in terms of deciding who's going to have liability moving forward for placement services, et cetera, whether it is the court and the state or whether it's going to be back on the school district.
The last question I have is, I'm looking at the costing here of 2.5 million, 5.9 million, and 0.9, close to 1. Are we looking at, for FY26, this exploding on us further? Are we going to see costs? In other words, our episode of treatment looks like it's increasing in costs.
I think that
Are we increasing the number of students, or are we just increasing in costs?
I think that it's increasing the number of students. I think it's both, but I think that we will not see. There was a change in legislative language last year, where it had previously said that episode of treatment would pay for the placement, and so we had been paying for the placement because that's what the language said. The language currently says that we will only pay for special education and related services, and then the placement falls back to DHHS as they're the ones that are placing it. So I don't think that the numbers are going to be as high because we are not going to be paying for the placement.
Thank you.
And if I may, for court-ordered placements, these numbers also do not reflect how much districts pay for that cap, because they do have to pay a cap of 3 times the average cost per pupil. So this is just what we give out for court-ordered placements. It does not include what districts also have to pay.
Okay. Any further questions on this aspect of it? Not seeing any. You have several other sheets here.
I do. So special education aid, it's the chart, small chart like this. This just shows you the breakdown of special education aid since 2007, 2008, and how much we have paid out each year. Tells you the number of students, the sum of district liability for CAP. We did not calculate that before 2019, 2020, so I did not have those numbers. But then it tells you how much the cost to the district was for 3.5 times up to 10 times the average cost per pupil, or the estimated cost per pupil. Then the number of students that are 10 times the estimated cost per pupil, and how much that was, and then the total district cost. So the sum of their entitlement after we have reviewed everything and said this is allowed, this is not allowed, and then if it had to be prorated based on the amount of money that we had and what that proration was at the end. So this is that documentation for the past almost 20 years.
Representative Murray, did you have your hand up? Or Representative Ames?
Take advantage of this low. sum of district liability for the cap.
So that's how
What are we
much,
talking about there?
that's how much they pay in the cap, which is the 3.5 times the estimated cost per pupil. They are responsible for all of that, and that's how much the district's paid for the cap.
In that, what's the range? The low is 20,000 or something like that?
The estimated cost per pupil, it changes every year. Right now, it's right around 70,000 for the 3.5 times estimated cost per pupil. Is right around 70.
Roughly 20 hours, about right, yeah, of the start.
So they are responsible for that 70,000. So if it's 70,000, because that's right around that, and it has been for the last few years.
Right, fair enough.
If it's 70,000, they're responsible for that entire amount before we start to help them, and then we pay 80% after 3.5 times,
Right,
and then after 10 times we pay 100%.
right. Okay.
So may I clarify? Thank you. So if I hear you, Becky, so what you're saying is that 70,000 must be fulfilled first before you all start
Yes.
any payments.
Yes, and then we have to verify that it is an allowable cost by looking at the child's IEP versus the invoices that are submitted to us.
Okay.
And it's reimbursed. It's not-
And it's a reimbursement program. A special education aid is, yes, you submit it at the end of the school year. So like we're working on last year's special education aids, and they give us all of their documentation up to June 30th.
Thank you.
Representative Ames?
So what is the typical time lag between the district having to pay out money for the, whatever it is, and getting money back from the state?
So thank you for the question. So they pay for everything from July 1. So if we were looking at last year, they paid everything from July 1 of 2024 until June 30th of 2025. And then they have to submit to us by July 30th their documentation that they paid for these items. And we work on reimbursement from we really work on it from July 1 until we try to get done by December 1, and then districts are reimbursed at the beginning of January. So you have to wait 6 months after the end of the year before you are reimbursed those funds.
It could be a year and a half. Do I have that right?
Yes, because if you have costs that were incurred July 1 of 2024, you won't get it until January 1 of 2026.
Right.
Yeah, I had to
18 months. Got it.
yeah, it could be up to 18 months, yes.
So there's, Representative Dry, no, Representative Dry, go ahead.
So my math brain helped 2012 to 2013. Seems like 43 million is kind of an anomaly between the 2 years because all the other columns are very similar all the way across. But that 20 fewer students and a huge jump in.
I was not here then, so I could not speak to that.
I'm just wondering if maybe a misprint because everything else kind of lines up all the way across the rest of the chart.
So which one are we looking at? The 43. I can double check it for you.
Just question.
I would just offer that one thing that I've tried to do in preparation for being able to be a part of this conversation is make a special education timeline over the years of things that have changed in a given year. So there may be some correlation to the fact that there were some significant changes to CHINs, for example, which we haven't even talked about, around 2011, 2012. So that could have led to more students becoming eligible or more students being placed in out-of-district placement. There's some other things potentially as well, and some changes that were made federally to IDEA over time that might have also changed some of those things. It may also just be that you had a high population, a very intensive needs population that year for whatever reason. But that's something certainly that we could look at for a lot of these years in terms of, what legislation that may have passed or federal changes or programmatic changes, et cetera.
Thank you.
Yes, Dwayne.
And I think the other thing that I would just point out about the state special ed aid program too is the actual cash that the district gets is around January 1st in almost every entity and time in my career for every district that I've worked for. We've already set the tax rate. So there has been 2 instances in my career where we submitted invoices to the Department of Ed, had an estimate as what our state special ed aid was going to be, and then had some of those invoices, and some of them can be significant, disallowed for a variety of reasons. And usually that's a district issue because the department uses the same, kind of rules about what's allowable and not allowable. Didn't match. Usually it'll be an invoice you submit that doesn't match the IEP. They get removed and then your aid goes down. So what was maybe used at tax rate setting for state special ed aid can be different when you actually get the money. And as you know, revenue, once you set the tax rate, you're locked into that. So districts will be, I will be, I'll speak for myself, but I know other districts, most districts or all districts will be conservative when they use that figure in tax rate setting. So that's part of this whole timeline as well. So the money does come for some expenses 18 months later, but you're also using a figure that isn't finalized for a very important process for raising taxes in the local school districts.
Dwayne, some communities, I don't know if Bo is one, where they have an account where they put cash aside for that rainy day when we're going to have that child move in, that's going to be a very expensive child. Are many districts doing that now, or how do these accounts look like?
Yeah, that's a good, good question. I mean, a lot of districts have those accounts. They work like a capital reserve fund. They kind of fall under an expendable trust, but for special education, unexpected special education expenses is what they're usually set up. It's a lot of it can be about the wording. We have one in Dunbarton that is really restrictive because it talks about unexpected and unanticipated special education costs. When this was first allowed for districts to use a fund like that, that was kind of the suggested language. You almost have to go into a deficit in the entire budget in order to access that in some districts. Some districts it's very open-ended and it's written better. Those are very important tools, I think, on the expenditure side. If you have, unexpected things happen, not every district has those. So, those are a tool that districts can use for sure.
So I have one follow-up, and then I'll get to
Okay.
Rep. Summary. The RAN, Reimbursement Anticipation Note, which Claremont's going through that. But you can take that money from 2 areas within your budget, from your adequacy monies or from your special education aid monies. Now, is that the reason why we have that ability to borrow from your rainy day, loan type thing out of your special education aid money because we have districts which are getting these unexpected hits for the catastrophic?
I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. I mean, so if you have if you have a student move in, totally unanticipated, budget is set, and it's a very expensive placement, you have an anticipation that the following year you are going to get state special ed aid on that student, but you've got to pay for it up front. So if you are going to have a deficit issue, you do have the ability to borrow against your future state special education aid. However, if you do that, at some point you've got to pay that back. I don't believe it's a process that a lot of districts have done in the past. It's kind of a last resort. A few years ago, we had a situation exactly like that happen in one of our districts. And, we alert the board immediately, and you start to look at ways that you can mitigate that within what you have. That's not always possible, but that's the first thing that you try to do. And then you kind of work through the other options that you have. And I do think that is an option, but I think it's a late in the game option, kind of one of the last things you would want to do, because is is to basically advance
Yeah.
your anticipated aid because there's going to be a year, whether it's the next year or years down the road, where you're going to be eligible for some aid, but you're not going to get it because you already got it early. So.
Representative Murray?
Yes, thank you. So I did have a question in going back when we were just sort of talking about a couple of things about the language that can sort of limit or restrict movement of the monies out of the trust fund into your general ledger. I'm just thinking about, line item expenses elsewhere, in political subdivisions. For that account to go into a negative deficit would really put the district in a tricky place, right? If it were to have to wait until that fund was so low that it was so how, I guess what I'm asking is what is generally the threshold of like folks saying, okay, is it when you're actually in the red, or is it like when you're down to a very low, like, I guess that's my question. I'm sorry if that's not quite clear.
Do you mean the capital reserve expendable
Yes,
trust?
and then to be able to move the money out of the,
Yeah, it depends on how it's written. Some districts, I work for one, wants the voters to be the agents to, it's called the agents to expend for one of those funds, right? They want the board to be the agents. They basically, the voters want the board to come to them to put money in and to come to them to take money out. Now, a lot of districts, and I work for the other district I work for, the board is the agent to expend. And so that's much more flexibility to use funds like that because you can have a hearing, basically have a hearing of the board to basically inform the public that you're going to use funds out of this account. And then after the hearing, close it at a regularly scheduled board meeting, and it can be right after the hearing, then vote to actually do it. And then there's some paperwork that you have to do with DRA because you're essentially increasing your appropriation and things like that. But it depends on how it's written, I guess, is how I would describe
can I have
that.
one more follow-up if
Yes.
that's, okay, thank you very much. So with regard to, so essentially that would be determined in a warrant article? Yeah, okay. And so if the district, or excuse me, the voters, would a special meeting be called in that circumstance? Or how does that work? Sorry.
Depends on the timing. If it's close to your annual meeting, you could do it in that process. If it's not, you would need, the situation was that dire, yes, you'd have to have a special meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And you can, I should have mentioned, you can change the agents on a capital reserve or a trust fund, but you have to vote on that. So like in one of our districts, if we wanted to do that, and that debate is going to happen because of what's been going on in, a number of places and kind of where, everything is, the landscape right now, you would put a warrant article out there to change the agents, and you'd have to, my understanding, I've never done it, but I think you would have to do that for each of the funds that you want to do it in a separate warrant article for each of the funds.
I see, thank you.
Rebecca? Becky?
It's fine, we know.
I'm going to go Wilson. Go ahead.
I do think, just to kind of piggyback on what's been said, one of the most challenging aspects from a district perspective is being true to the word as to whether or not something was unanticipated when you're going to remove money from these funds, because there are situations that seem more obvious. A student perhaps moves into town in the middle of the year after your budget's been done, et cetera. There are other things where you're potentially, as a district director, trying to plan out maybe 18 months in advance your budget, and in trying to anticipate what students in your district may need, what could happen in terms of placement for individual students. You're really trying to think far ahead. And I think that is why sometimes during the budget process for districts, you're doing these massive budgets and warrant articles, a year, sometimes longer ahead of time, to try to guess to some extent what students that about are going to need a year and a half from now. And I think it's just really difficult sometimes when you do get something that happens in district for a student that you know to explain whether or not something was truly unanticipated. In which case, if you know you really can't pass that, you know, straight face test on that, you are, at least for most districts, freezing your entire budget to try to figure out, as Dwayne said, how to mitigate that with money that you've already appropriated, how to maintain other programs in your district for all the students that you're trying to, you know, take care of in that situation. So it's not as easy as just you have an unexpected cost and you can go to the fund and take it out. Those funds are really for very specific situations, and I think districts are pretty mindful of that when they're going to the taxpayer asking them to put money into those accounts. It's not necessarily, you know, a rainy day fund in the way that some people might think about it. It really is there as a place people can go in some of these really situational moments where you have a very specific cost. But once you know that cost is there, it's no longer unanticipated. So even if you've already, you know, for the next year's budget, you've got to figure out how to incorporate that, you know, whether it's April or September or whatever month that's happening.
Further questions on this aspect of it? I will have one down the road, Becky. Rebecca. For that. We're dealing, what happens when we change the 3.5 down to 3?
I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. And that's critical to how we're going to cost out special education here. And take some of that burden off the local district where you become eligible. But if we take the figures we have right now, it's going to be a steep cliff as far as the more kids are going to be eligible, the lower you drop this thing down. And it's not going to be just the kid that has a special bus and has a para. So I think we got to really start thinking about how we're going to address this. There is legislation moving forward that's going to drop this thing from 70 grand to 60 grand or less earlier. And so just for your information, I'm sure you're already aware of it. Okay. You have another colorful sheet for us here.
Yep, so the last one.
This one has a couple different pieces of information on it. On the left-hand side, the blue column just lists special education aid and the number of students receiving special education. It's just a total of that sheet we just looked at. In the middle, what our administrator for finance has done is it looked at the DOE 25, which every district submits to the Division of Educational Analytics and Resources, or DEAR, and they have a whole section around special education. So he's taken the numbers that were submitted by districts. In those sections related to special education, there are 5 sections. He only did the 4 because that was where he saw the changes, the most changes year over year. There's instruction, there's related services, transportation, and administration. And this is just special education that they're listing on their DOE 25. And you can see year over year how much that changes. It gives you the total amount, it gives you the change, and then it gives you the percentage of change year over year for each of those services. The one I would like to point out is if you look at transportation, he has broken it down as the change from fiscal year 2022, some fiscal year 17 to 2022, the change was about 0.64%. From fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 25, the change was 97%. And then overall from fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 25, the change has been 98%. Of change in transportation costs. And you'll see that instruction, there was about a 31% change year over year. Related services, a 57% change year over year. And then administration is a 57% change year over year. And so these are just numbers to kind of show you what is being reported on the DOE 25 in the categories that's collected. On the end, it just tells you the percentage of that total between the 4 categories. So for instruction, it's 75% of these 4 categories. Related services is 15% of these 4 categories, and so on.
Can you describe what administration is?
I can read it to you. So So administration costs, costs concerned with directing and managing the provision of special education instruction and related services. These activities are accomplished by an assistant superintendent, coordinator, director, or other administrator or manager whose principal function, 50% or more, is in the supervision or operation of special education programs. These activities include clerical, secretarial, or other administrative support. This does not include a superintendent, assistant superintendent, principal, or other administrator who supervises the provision of special education instruction as a part less than 50% of the operation of the school or school district. If these services are provided by the SAU, be sure to include the district's prorated share of such supervision.
Do all SAUs have a special ed director?
They have somebody, they don't necessarily call them the special ed director, but they may have an assistant superintendent, they may have a director of student services, but yes, they need to have somebody who functions in that role and completes those duties.
Is that 50% rule? Is that law? Is that a rule? Is that?
I would have to ask Dear.
There's a lot here to try to.
Yep.
Have you broken this thing
Divide the
down
list.
to the actual districts?
No, we took these from the totals that Dear had calculated, and he just
Yeah.
put them into one document so that we could see just the special education pieces.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman Ladd. And isn't it true though that like some of our iReport data and stuff can be broken out by district if we were individually interested in districts?
Yes.
Okay.
If I could, you could get the info by district because every district has to submit
Yes.
Yeah.
a DU 825, and these figures come from the supplemental section. After the main section that we do for all of funds, there's a supplemental section in the bottom after that, and these come from what's submitted by each district. So
Yep. So you could
it'd be
get,
a long report, but
Yes.
you could definitely get it.
and I will say the only other category we did not include was the legal category, just because our administrator did not see as much of a change in that one as in the other four.
So would the percentages for the individual districts be pretty similar, or are there some districts where you're seeing, there's outliers, or there's percentages which are much greater, and then we ask the question, why?
I think you would probably see a variation. We did not look at it individually. It's only been a week, so we did not look at it by individual district. We just looked at it overall for the state. But I think you would probably see a variation
Is
from
it
district.
possible to get a sheet identifies districts and these, associated costs or percentages?
I
So
can,
that we can look at and seems, there's a lot of kids in this particular program. Here they're not, but the overall enrollment maybe, what are the causations? Maybe it's just the nature of the community or the property values or the income levels. I don't know, but I'd like to look at that so we can start delving into this a little bit further. Representative Ames.
I think some work was done on this question of, I think I'm backing up a little bit, of the special education costs that are related to 75%, the 85%, and so forth, that where you're trying to see what the cost would be of going down to, what, 3 times.
Yeah.
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 I think that some of that inquiry by the legislature, by this commission, was done before this commission was put together. There was another committee. I think you just met yesterday. And is there some work that would help newbies like myself that's been done that would be available that we should be looking for.
We can ask it. You're saying yesterday? Of course, we did act on a bill yesterday.
Was it?
So-
I thought there was there was a committee on special education, a subcommittee maybe.
Yeah, we did
Yeah,
have one.
You
Yeah.
did.
I don't know if we ever got down here though with that information. I think that we couldn't get the information.
So I think there was one meeting, I actually was out there listening to it, and you had a number, 2 or 3 or 4 impressive local special education directors who
Yeah.
provided
yep.
information, and it became apparent that it was very difficult to break out what you're trying to break out.
Yes. And we were also talking Medicaid to school money as
Yeah.
well at that same time with them.
But if there's anything there that should be brought forward.
Okay, we'll look.
Yeah.
Representative Murray?
That would be a question for Jen, correct? And she could look through perhaps and see if that's there, or or is that, would that be in our
I just don't
education?
recall whether Jen was in or out of that.
Okay,
You know, I know
Okay.
what Representative Ames is referencing now. I'd have to look. I can talk to Jen as well. Representative, Senator,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm gonna have to look up when you say representative first and then senator, I know it's me.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for some clarification on the administration. There seems to be a huge jump here to 25.25%. Can I get some clarification on why that is? Where the instruction seems to say pretty much steady.
I would have to look at it district by district. Like I said, we just were able to pull this together so we could show the changes because we've been asking. I would have to look at it district or see if DEER has done any analysis of the costs increasing.
Okay, thank you.
you now have a new person in analytics over there working with you now. Is that correct? Or in your department, a finance person?
I have an administrator of finance, yes, who's working on special education aid currently.
Was he the one that did this right here?
Yes, he was able to pull it from the DOE 25s that are online, and he just put it into one document and then determined the changes year over year.
Is it possible that he could come to one of our meetings where we could delve into some of his spreadsheets or on this a little bit more?
Yep, I can see what I can do.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Rebecca right now? I guess we're good. So thank you very much. The other item which we have on the agenda is I'd like to just have an open discussion now as to where is the next step. We've talked about having Kate Baker Demers come in. However, I've also expressed the need that we start looking at our costing formula and delving into that. It's going to be upon us with all the LSRs that are coming at us, and I'd like to have a little bit more information there. Any other areas which we have to really hit here that are within our responsibilities? You see the duties there in the initial SB 57. Yeah.
So I'm very curious, maybe someone from DHHS can come in. Where's the handoff for children when they go into a facility? When does that no longer become the cost of the district? That might be an area where we can have that handoff a little sooner, where they get services where they're at, instead of having the district continue to pay for it when they've been placed somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay, that would probably be Henry Lippman, right? So we could invite him back. He's always, willing to come in. I've always asked him the question too, how do we discern between academic and medical costs? And that's where and he's indicated to us we've left a lot of dollars on the table.
Yes.
When he said we're going after approximately $8.8 million receiving, but we're leaving close to half that or $5 million on the table that we're not applying for. that we've got to get on top of. So we'll have Henry Littman come back in. Yeah. Representative Ames, and then Becky.
First is just a question, whether there is or is expected to be impact on the DOE staffing because of the federal government's cutbacks on staffing support.
So we have received all of our funding for this year. They gave us our allocation on October 1. So we do have funding for our staff and to provide to the districts for this year. I don't know what will happen next year, but we do have all of the funding for this year.
And you mean by fiscal year, you mean fiscal year?
Their fiscal year runs October 1 to September 30, and they just gave us our funding until September 30 of 2026.
Okay, that's good. And then to the chair, I think it's true that we've got a number of members of this commission that are not appointed or not here. The advocate for special education or designee, is that still?
That position is still vacant.
Yep.
The position is vacant, so there can be no designee. Okay, and then 2 special education parent advocates appointed by the governor?
They're not yet appointed.
Well, there was reason for their being on this list.
Yep, there
not
was.
having them.
And that's why Becky Wilson's here. I appointed her, that the chair appoints one, and she's taken off her school board's hat, and she should be taking off the orange badge while she's here. But she took off that hat because the experience she's had in special ed her whole career and administration as well. Is a wonderful resource. So, so there's 3 people you've just mentioned there, Dick, that are not here. And I will contact the governor's office and find out what's going on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Ladd. So just a couple things. I appreciate the being nominated and put on this commission. Second, we do have a inquiry into the Secretary of State about whether or not I should be wearing my lobbying badge when I'm sitting up here. I think we are erring on the side of caution, quite honestly, because people know me in that light, and we certainly don't want to misrepresent when I'm in this room with somebody watching from home on the live stream or something like that, where I'm not wearing my orange badge. So it is a question that we have about whether or not I should be wearing it when I'm sitting up here, but just for transparency of people who may not be in the room, I don't want anyone to misinterpret what role I'm in up here. I appreciate that very much. To go back to a previous comment, I wonder if it might be helpful to have some sort of chart of placements that are made for special education in general, whether it's a court-ordered placement, an episode of treatment, foster student, unilateral parental placement, charter schools, EFAs, all these different placements that districts are trying to negotiate, because there is a different process to determining who's liable financially in all of those situations. They're all different. So I wonder if that would help the conversation, at least to try to get a handle on why some things are put on the back of the local district, why some things are falling on the department, why some fall on DHHS, just so that you could see maybe more clearly why some of these decisions are what they are. I appreciate that Henry Littman is an excellent person to speak to all of that, but even just DHHS, they're overseeing episodes of treatment, some court ordered, some foster placement. It gets very confusing in terms of how decisions are made about where kids are placed. So I would be happy to try to work on something that could capture some of those decision-making processes if that was useful.
There is some discussion up, I think, on the Lakes region of how they're going to address students that need to be placed in a residential placement in terms of, is it Winnisquam? Is it yours?
My district.
Where that's a discussion, I think it's a healthy discussion to have. Whereas the state that I keep referencing, Arkansas, doesn't send anybody out of their state. They try to keep them all in their state in residential placements, which I think is an excellent idea for so many reasons. So is that something that, Rebecca, that the the department is encouraging and, or is it being done through the administrators associations or the,
It's something that they had discussed on their own. We did go and talk to them about different things they needed to consider as they developed this plan that they were talking about. But it is something that it's, we talked with three districts from the Lakes region regarding it. And I know that there was a representative from the New Hampshire Association of New Hampshire School Administrators Association. Oh, sorry, I always get my alphabet mixed up. But there was a representative there from that, and we discussed with them. It's a plan they're working on. We said, "Have you thought about this? Have you talked about this?" But it is something that they're working on themselves.
might be something we as a state will look to how to incentivize this type of activity and support it in some way.
That is a bit different though, however, than another issue that has come up in Winnisquam in terms of that school district has within their bounds a placement for DHHS. So students who are being placed there from DHHS are attending Winnisquam schools, and some of them have some significant needs that have nothing to do with their living arrangement, so to speak, and the impact that that's having on local districts. As if students are moving in. So I think it goes back to what is the placement that is being made, where are kids being placed, who is placing them, and how do those different decisions get made, and who's at the table financially when those decisions are coming about.
Well, and just to piggyback off that, Becky, thank you. The biggest issue for Winnisquam is the 11 kids that are placed in that district, and the district is responsible for the cost of their special education. It's not a large school district. So I do think that needs further exploration because, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to clarify that they're not responsible for the cost of special education because some of them are not students with disabilities.
Right.
But they are responsible for any extra costs beyond the tuition rate. And that's, I think, where the issue lies. It's not just necessarily special education because you can ask the resident district to pay for those costs. It's costs outside of that they are responsible for these 11 students.
Right, and it's such a gray area that it really needs to be drilled down on.
It's considered a foster placement from what I have been understand.
Exactly, and that's why I asked about foster care. So thank you. I'm glad we're going to explore that.
Representative Ames?
Yeah, I didn't want to lose track of your offer to provide us with sort of a map of different categories that are meaningful in terms of the routes that are followed for children who are in need.
I'll do my best to try to capture something. I just, from a 10,000 foot view, there's so many processes that special education teams or directors or whomever are trying to manage, and they are all different. So I think, and the outcome financially is different depending on which process you are required to follow. So I think it would be helpful for everybody to start with an understanding of which process teams are trying to negotiate in a given situation.
I just have one other.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just trying to remember suppressive data rules and requirements given the 11 students. I just wanted to make sure that when we're talking about information, we're talking about generalities, no de-identifiable information, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to refresh everyone's memory.
Let me clarify that for you. There were 11 students placed. If I erroneously stated they were special ed, I apologize. There were 11 students placed. That's a fact. That's public knowledge.
There's a lot to that story. We don't want to go into it here.
Exactly.
Yeah. All righty. We have one last thing to do is that the report that we have, the initial report has to be submitted on November 1. Jen has put together part of the boilerplate here that we have done. We always list the people that are on the commission. Hopefully we can get some more on it. But if we don't by November 1, we'll go with the names we have here. And the commission charge and the purpose and process, procedures, and then a little reference as to what we've done at each of the meetings, plus attaching the minutes of these meetings to it. And this would be the initial report. You can see it on October 29th on the last side there. We talk about our discussion charter schools and education freedom accounts. we've had some broader discussion today as well, and we can add some of that which we've gone into. Plus putting in these materials that were provided to us by the director. So are there any objections? I just want to get this thing off our hands and onto somebody's desk where it'll pile up with all the other papers that they receive. The big report is going to be a year from now. So, but
I just wanted to clarify, is it in July that the report is due, not necessarily 1 year from now, right? I thought it was July 1. Is that correct?
it would say right there, if somebody had the bill in front of you,
Bill,
commission, yeah, SB 57,
July 1, 2020.
July 1,
Yeah, July 1.
yeah,
Okay.
good.
Next meeting,
Pardon me?
next meeting.
Yeah, that's where we are right now.
Thank you.
Next meeting, get your calendars out. You're going to be getting a little bit of information. Talk to Kate Baker as well, Demers, have her come in, and others here that might be helpful with us discussing the formula. We're basically ready to go in November here. The week of November 10th is pretty busy for myself here. We're trying to close up our retained bills here. And we have some things which going to be a lot of discussion. Is the week of November 17th open?
Not the beginning of it. Lisa and
We're going to be at a
Yeah,
conference.
a
in New
conference.
Orleans.
Okay,
And then the following week, is that the Thanksgiving holiday?
pardon me?
And the following week is Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and in the following week, yeah. Which some people are going to be gone, I'm sure. So
It's only going to get harder.
Yeah.
it's going to get much more difficult, yeah.
How about the end of that week with this?
What about when are you going to Bermuda?
I'm not going to Bermuda.
Well, I thought you said you're going now somewhere.
New
Orleans.
Orleans.
New Orleans. Don't you speak English?
17th or 19th.
Okay, so, when are you going?
17th through 19th.
of November.
17th through 19th.
19th. Golly, Mr. Chairman.
So we try to stay away from Fridays where people are taking off.
Yeah.
And that's going into the Thanksgiving week.
Right.
The 20th is, of course, you're gonna come back exhausted, huh?
Yes, and
I
yeah,
have to,
Victoria thinks she has to babysit me, which is really funny.
That's
both of
because
us.
she must have some
we're gonna be
Irish in you.
together.
Not me.
Italian, you know what?
Italian and Irish, that doesn't mix too good.
Gaelic and Gaelic. I think the 20th, we do have a committee meeting. Representative Dry, is that, do we have a committee meeting?
I thought it's the 5th and
The 4th and the 5th and the 6th for retained bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
then December 17th is session. Right.
December 17th is session, House session. Yeah,
Is
veto
Wednesday-
day.
Is Wednesday the 26th not good? Are people getting
That's-
ready for Thanksgiving? Is that?
That's
I don't have
the
a
day
problem
before
with it.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am gonna be in Myrtle Beach.
Well, why don't we just move the meeting there?
That's we'll just pop it there from New Orleans.
Yeah, move it down on the beach there, why not, yeah.
Perfect sense.
The 20th is there is something people are scheduled things on
Okay.
the 20th. I have some.
What about 21st?
That's the Friday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm open to Friday.
I don't have.
Friday morning.
That's
What's the general consensus? Show of hands. Friday, the November 21st.
good with me. All I have here is act on retained bills by that date. That's our
Can't make
drop dead date, so we're good.
Yeah.
You can fill me in. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be in your neck of the woods.
Where are you going?
We go up north the weekend before Thanksgiving every year.
So you go up to Concord, huh?
We go up and we,
Yeah.
we go to Santa's Village still, the boys humor me.
Okay, there you go. Okay, good. So,
What time?
okay, so we're on the 21st, mornings or afternoon?
Morning.
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 Preference morning, show of hands?
Yeah, get it done.
Okay, so we'll have the 10-minute rule for you, Senator.
She won't be here.
No, I'm talking about you. We have another senator here.
After 9:30, it's no problem. 10 o'clock's perfect.
Okay.
Okay,
10:05.
Yeah.
I'll be here at 10 o'clock.
so
Schedule
10,
it at
10 o'clock,
9:05.
10 o'clock on the 21st. Okay, get it in your calendars.
Aye, aye.
Any further discussion from folks today? Not seeing then, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
5 minutes to 12.
Oh, does anybody know if they've got the cafeteria completed?
Here? No cafeteria.
What do you mean, no?
There's a vending machine.
Yeah.
I thought they were gonna do the cafeteria